That's good. Well, first of all, Chris, I want to welcome you to Framing Leadership. So this is part of Framework Leadership, kind of leadership podcast. We try to invite leaders we love and we think are outstanding and kind of exemplify what leadership is. And you're definitely one of those people. So, I mean, you're probably one of the most authentic leaders I've ever met. I've had the pleasure to work with you for really the last few years. But, I think the one thing I wanted people to see with Chris Deluzio is how authentic you are. You have a group of people who will follow you anywhere. I mean, there is a group that would get on a band and we'd be your roadies, the Deluzio, BJ Jones roadies, to go to any company you guys set your 10 up at, and we'd help you do whatever that needed to make that company successful. I think that's kind of the interesting thing I've seen through working with you and BJ is just the roadies and the followers you built, people who love your leadership style. They're drawn to it, and you kind of exemplify an authentic leadership that I think is rare in the level that you're at. I mean, because you've led large organizations, mid-sized organizations, startup organizations. You have this philosophy that's really business and people first. I think people first is your first mindset. So I just want to ask you a question. How did you develop that mindset around authenticity? And when you hear people say Chris Deluzio is a pretty authentic leader, what does that mean to you?
Well, first off, thank you. I think you're embellishing a bit, but I appreciate that about you, Todd. So thank you. Thanks to you and Rich for having me. For me, I think about this. I hear that a lot, is the authenticity, right?
Yeah.
And for me, what I learned early in pharma, as I'm sure you did, and while we were at two different organizations, I think they were relatively similar, where senior leaders at the level that like I was just at in the last organization I was at, they were untouchable and unapproachable. And I remember one leader in particular when I started in the industry. It was a large training class, 600 people. And I remember him in a full suit and tie, walking amongst the audience and literally puffing his chest out, putting his hands across his chest. And like, you even looked at him and you were like, you would cower to some extent. And I remember thinking, being very young at the time, that, if I ever get into a position of leadership, and at the time it was me thinking maybe being a district manager, that's not how I'm going to be. And, the authentic approach that I take is, I'm no different than you or anybody else that may be sitting in the audience or works in an organization that I'm in. I just happen to be at a different level doing a different job. You and I have talked about it, where I've said, I'm an idiot like the rest of us. You know what I mean? And I've just had some luck along the way and worked with some very good people that have allowed me to get in more of a senior level position. So first and foremost, the authenticity is, I'm no different than anybody else. Again, our background may be different. We may have been raised a little bit differently, but I'm just in a different position. So, I think the other piece that adds to it in terms of the authenticity is the humility.
Yeah.
And I've struggled with that, in that, again, calling myself an idiot. I always joke, a few years back, we all know Cafe Pharma. Someone had put on Cafe Pharma, and a buddy of mine brought it up to me, and he said, "Hey, there's this funny comment about you where it said, listen, if you want to do well with Chris Deluzio, just take him to every restaurant you possibly can, because he's fat and he likes to eat." And I'm like, that's true. I do like to eat. But, my point is the humility is good. And I recognize there's, I have a ton of proverbial warts. As a leader, I think showing some of that humility and being true to it, meaning it can't be manufactured, is important, but not too much humility. Where you show too much humility, and then people may believe it and think, wow, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. Right. So it's, again, I'm like, you guys,
it's disingenuous, because you have a lot of strengths. And if you're so self-deprecating and so humble, people are starting like, this guy, he doesn't understand his strength, or he's just kind of played the crowd a little bit. And, I think to your point, I think there's a difference between being humble, which brings people in and helps people be part of the process of making that company better, which I think you do really well. And then there's a thing of being so self-deprecating that people are like, it's painful. He's too sweet. I'm getting a toothache because I don't know. You know what I mean?
Yes. Or I can take advantage of that. And I don't want anyone ever think that. And I think a good balance, the example I try to give, and you live this with me, is something like call planning, to stand up in front of a group and say that I know everything and here's what you should do every day from a call planning standpoint is unrealistic.
Right.
Be able to say, I don't know it, guys. You know the local level. I don't know every territory in this country. I need your input, please. And then we'll bring it together and I'll do what you need me to do. And that's lead how we get through that. So, I think with that humility, again, to your point, being humble, you have to find the balance. And with that, the balance to that humility is setting expectations.
Yeah.
That authenticity and humility helps me build relationships. And I think what you and others would agree with is to say, in any family or any organization where you build those relationships, it can't be all good all the time.
Yeah.
And with that comes expectations, right? We preached all the time at Biohaven, we are a family.
Yeah.
Well, you know what, TB, right? If you're not performing as a family member, I'm going to hold you accountable.
Yeah.
And we're going to figure out what we're going to do. The difference for me is the family aspect of saying we're going to work together to figure it out, but doesn't mean you're not going to be held accountable. So
Right.
I think the authenticity and the humility allows you to build relationships and then create that family atmosphere where people want to win together. It's, your comment about people want to do anything for me. I think it's they want to do anything for us because
Right.
we've built this incredible team. And with that comes setting expectations, accountability, and things like that. The last thing I will say, and you and I have had many discussions around this, is you truly have to listen and care. And the end care piece is what matters to me, meaning we just talked about it, right? Hayden and Haley, right? I have 3 kids. You know what my kids' interests are. I think almost in any leadership book early on, when you grew up in the industry, as a leader, you have to ask somebody, so tell me about yourself and tell me about your family.
Yeah.
You leave that conversation and they remember nothing.
Right.
The authenticity of being a good leader who truly listens and cares for me is to be able to say, hey, Todd, how are Hayden and Haley? That type of thing versus, somebody said to me recently, how are your 2 kids doing? I'm like, 2 of them are good, but I have a 3rd as well. So my point is truly listening and caring, in my opinion, has helped me create a following that I think we could go anywhere together and achieve success.